Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Idle South Region Sustainability in the Workplace webinar. It is with great pleasure that we have Martin Wiles, the Head of Sustainability from the University of Surrey, with us today. So at this point, I will say over to you, Martin.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Alistair. And hello, everybody. My name is Martin Wells, Head of Sustainability at the University of Surrey. Just so you know, my background, I've been working in sustainability now for about 35 years. So yeah, I know. How could possibly somebody so young looking have worked so long in sustainability? So, but yes, I have. I've done it in a number of different organisations. So most recently, I was at University of Bristol. Now I'm at Surrey over in Guildford, and I look at sustainability across our entire estate. And I get involved in all sorts of things. So it's really about integrating it into everything that we do. So it's not just about myself greening the machine, so all the operations, the buildings, and those sorts of things, but it's also looking at what we do as a kind of product. So our graduates, so we get involved with curriculum and outreach and community engagement, etc. So in partnerships. So there's a lot that we get involved in. I'm a relatively small team. So, but a big focus of what we are doing is what I'm going to talk to you about today is around our carbon work. So, and our net zero plan that we developed at Surrey. So, and I'm going to take you through some of the steps about some of the thinking, just to explain a little bit about the challenge of doing this, and really where that kind of hopefully it sort of like resonates a little bit with some of you out there and some of the thinking that you might have. So some initial sort of thoughts about things. So there is a bit of a challenge. So carbon emissions. So we have more carbon emissions in gas than electricity. You can see 55% of our energy use, and this is for scope one and scope two, I should say. So what I'm looking at here is energy use in buildings. So electricity and gas primarily. So we don't have very much fleet. We have a little bit of fleet management within all of that, but the majority of our scope one and two emissions, so that's emissions that we have at site, so like gas, boilers, etc., and electricity, which is our scope two that we get from a power station. Most of that, those two scopes, are in our buildings. And as you can see, in a way, we're trying to decarbonise our gas side of things as a primary thing. Electricity is being decarbonised on the grid, so as more and more renewable energy comes on board there. But one of the things that you can see, which is the I've got these two pie charts here. The second pie chart is shows really how expensive our electricity is, and so for that 45% of the emissions, it's a significant amount. So that's a kind of challenge for us. So it would be very easy just to sort of say, okay, we will shift our gas use, which is where that carbon is, noting that the electricity is being decarbonised from the grid. We can shift that across, but all we're going to do is make a very large cost for ourselves. So one of the things that really the first challenge is to make sure that by switching from gas to electricity, which is what we're ultimately aiming to do to decarbonize our heat. By doing that switch, we are trying to avoid doing just adding huge amounts of costs to electricity. So this is where we start to say we need to think about our this is where we need to think about doing renewable energy in particular for us, but a number of other things as well. So that's one of the first challenges, that cost challenge. The other challenge we have, and being in Guildford, and this is something that is nationally an issue, is about grid capacity. So most of the local area networks that manage, the national grid connections for us. Most of those areas work on a basis of what they just need in time for delivery in their area. So when anybody comes along to sort of say, well, we need more power because we're, I don't know, building something new, or we've got a new facility coming online, you ask for a grid connection. If they've got some available, great. Majority of places they haven't got that spare capacity, so they then say, well, we need to upgrade our infrastructure, and that will be £10 million, please. So we've had that at Guildford, and 10 million would have been getting off lightly with it. So that's a real challenge for us. So, and what we're showing you here in this bar chart is our electrical use, which is in the green. And then if we were just to convert all of our gas to electric boilers, for example, and run off electricity, this is the kind of demand that we would then get by replacing that gas heating with electric heating onto our grid capacity. The red line shows our available capacity at the site. So you can see we're going to need to double that if we just transfer straight onto electric. So it is a real challenge for us, that grid capacity connection. So this is why, for me, we need a plan that helps to manage that demand, but also gives us energy that doesn't have to come off the grid. So, and that's where we start to lead to our net zero plan, which I'll show you in a moment. I just for those of you who may be not driving the carbon activity along, I've just got a couple of charts just to show you how we've kind of looked at this, and you can see I've got a table here of where's the energy used within our buildings. We're a science-based university, so but we have lots of different things. So we have accommodation, we have office space, we have sports facilities, laundrettes, we have hall spaces for activities to go on in them, and of course we have STEM and labs around there, and a whole variety of different labs. And we've got a little table here that just shows of where the energy is being used. So, and in terms of carbon and cost, they're very similar. And it's a useful table for us to show our colleagues, because I think sometimes people go, oh right, it's all about lighting because I see lots of lights and we really need to do something there. And actually that's probably not the major hit for us. So things like space heating and conditioning of air, moving air around in whatever format, whether it's heated, cooling, humidity, is expensive to operate. So, and you can see that in those two tables. So it's really just to give that indication. And for the university, we have probably our biggest loads go around our lab spaces, which are, having fume cupboards, air conditioning, a whole range of different equipment, a huge amount. They're probably less than 10% of our space, but that 30% of our carbon. We then have data centers, so we have a lot of capacity. We're an AI university. We do a lot of work on in the digital infrastructure and digital economy, and then we've got accommodation, so which is heating and hot water. So you can see, those are the three kind of big ones for us. And I've got a table here. This represents about 70% of our buildings. So. And so you can see there's probably 100 plus buildings that we have as an organization, but we've focused in on these ones. And if I look down this list, and I say things like, I've got a building that says BC, we letter our buildings BC, AZ, AP. These are academic buildings, but they've got a lot of STEM in them, so they've got labs in them. So you can see the labs is one of those sort of things there. Vet school as well will be similar to that. Then I've talked about accommodation, so Millennium House, University Court, Stag Hill Court. Those are accommodation, and actually you can see they have a lot of gas use for heating hot water. So, and then we've got some data centers, and obviously we've got one down the bottom there that says it's called data center, and is more or less all electricity rather than gas. So, but we have other buildings that have a lot. So our G5 Innovation Centre and various other buildings along there. So you can see those three ones really are the bit of a focus for us. And we did this. This is data that we've got for gas, electricity, a lot of energy data, and we use that to drive what we're trying to do. But we really focus in on these ones. So, and this will now give you how much it is, 70% of our use in those sort of buildings. So this gives me a prioritization. So to think about those things I was saying before about where we use the energy, and this is how we prioritize it for our buildings. So we are starting to look at these. So that gives you a bit of kind of context, a bit of like the challenges for us. This shows you our very straightforward plan that we have around net zero. So 8 points of delivery. That basically breaks down into two chunks, really. The top four, so A, B, C, and D, those are all about demand management. And those are really the key things. We think we can reduce our demand significantly. So the two main areas in there is what we term efficient operational control and energy efficiency investment. So that control is really about, we have a building energy management system that controls heating and ventilation. But really what that is about is saying, well, we've got buildings that the lights are on and nobody's in that space, the heating's on, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Why are we doing that? So a lot of that is about us controlling those things better. We think there's a huge amount what we can do there, and we've actually employed a building energy management engineer to go through our buildings and look at this. So one of the first buildings they looked at, which was one of our health buildings, so part labs, part office space. We actually found a 30% reduction. So the loads on that building have gone from 30 odd kilowatts down to just around 20 kilowatts. So you can see it's significant impacts that we can get from that. And then we do need to use energy. We do need to have the lights on. We do need some heating. So we need to do that in an efficient manner. So one of the other things we're doing is looking at how we can do energy efficiency projects. So those are the really big chunky bits in demand. There is other things as well. We're looking at the space that we have. Are we utilising it effectively, especially post-COVID? And then, of course, anything that we build or we refurbish, we're making sure that we're not just adding to load and that we're fitting with net zero. So we do demand management, and then we look at the supply and the amount of energy that we do need that's left over. And what we're then really looking at is how we can decarbonize that energy. So, and in particular, we're looking at how we generate low and zero carbon energy. So renewables, CHP, all of those sorts of things we'll be looking at there. We feel we have quite a big potential at Surrey, actually bigger than a lot of other similar organisations, similar universities. So because we've got a lot of space, so we can actually put in a lot of solar. So that's one of the things we're looking at the moment. That means that probably our decarbonisation of heat is a smaller percentage of that, because we want to use quite a lot of that renewable energy to decarbonise our heat. So it might be putting it into thermal stores, into batteries, but also into providing power for heat pumps to do heating. So and other opportunities really. So, well, those are the two big areas in the decarbonising the actual loads that we have got to use. Decarbonising those is really around that heat and the generation of our own power. We are looking at buying energy, low energy off the grid. So we have in the past looked at power purchase agreements for that, and so that's point G, that low and zero carbon energy. There isn't enough really out there at the moment for that, and also we're still then dependent on a cost from somebody else. So if we can do it ourselves, it's usually a lower cost. And then offsetting. So we've put that really down to a very small amount, and there's going to be something that we can't get rid of. So we are going to probably have to think about some offsetting. But it's something like any organisation is not keen to do, because it's kind of money for nothing really, in a way. You're offsetting your emissions, you're paying someone else to do that for you, but you have to do it every year in, year out. So that's our 8-point plan. That it is. I talk about this as being very, very straightforward. It is two things: reduce demand, and then what you've got left, you decarbonize it by looking at how you can get renewable energy. So that's the plan. There's a lot more detail behind that, obviously, and there's a lot of work that we're doing, but that gives you a kind of feel for that. So this is a massively busy table to show you, but what this tries to give you an indication is how we start to operationalize those 8 points. So each of those things, what we think they might cost, so some estimates around that, and these are real. Some of these are real fingers in the air estimates. The benefits that might come from that. So that's always the thing to think about with decarbonisation. It's always seen as a significant cost, and that seems to be the way it's talked about. But there's also significant savings around that. And then where we might fund those things. So whether we fund it from our revenue, from our capital streams, whether we align it. So I think in point B there, I've talked about UOS, University of Surrey, LTM. So that's our long-term maintenance program. So we're having to replace boilers. Are we just replacing them like for like? Replacing light switches? Are we just sticking up cheap pop packs, or are we putting in proper LED lighting? So there's a lot that we can start to integrate into what we do as an organisation. And there's other funding as well, public sector decarbonisation program that the government runs, and third parties. So we partner at the moment with a third party organisation they basically provide the capital for some projects, and then they sell us that power from those projects, or we have a slightly different agreement, so like a contract energy management approach. So, but they basically come up with the capital, maybe even run those projects, install those projects, and charge us for the outputs of those things. So that gives us a long-term stability of price, but it also means that we don't have to find the capital. Unlike many organisations, we aren't awash with lots of money. So the rest of the table, well, it gives you a kind of RAG rating. So trying to sort of say what over what time scale and what impact they will have. And you can sort of see that the demand-based ones at the top, those first four, are pretty good paybacks. As you go down that table, I mean, just decarbonising heat will be a costly experience for us. So, and one of the things that we're trying very hard there is not to do the kind of we need to change the temp, like plug in air source heat pumps, which then mean you have to change the actual heating system connected to them, have bigger radiators, all of those sorts of things that might come with that. That's very disruptive. For many organizations, they don't have the decant space to do that kind of work because it's everywhere in the building. So we're trying to look at how we use high temperature systems to do that. But you can see that starts to become quite a challenge. So that bottom limits there. And there's also a bit there, the final column is just really about internally how we talk to decision makers and some of the things that we're going to need to do in there. And that delivery challenge is one of those things about what we might need to do. So finding funding, for example, that disruption that I talked about, limited availability for actually buying off the grid zero carbon energy that's certified, backed up by ROCs. So you can start to see that operationalizing it, some of the costs and some of the benefits in that. I mean, I just threw this one in. This is a bit of a time schedule for us, how we're working at the moment on the plan, the different sort of years that we're thinking about it. And you can start to see that some of these things are going to take more than the 2030 target that we've set ourselves to try and achieve. And I should have said that at the start. We're trying to get to net zero by 2030. So it's a challenge. And to be honest, what we've really focused on is having the right plan. So this is really where this has come from. This is all about trying to have the right plan. And then we can see, as we start to develop these things, how long these different areas will take. But I know that things like the decarbonising heat will take quite a while to do. You know, we've got hundreds of buildings, hundreds of boilers to replace. That is not going to be something that's going to be done very quickly. Energy efficiency as well. If you think about the hundreds of buildings and hundreds of rooms, just changing the lighting within all of those is going to take, there's lots and lots of little projects to be done and managed. So that's going to take a while. So, but that gives a kind of feel for where we're trying to go with this in terms of implementation. So that's the plan, those 8 points, the two main themes, demand and decarbonisation of the supply. Where are we at Surrey? So I should say I've been in place at Surrey now for about 18 months. So written the plan, developed that, and what we've now got are a number of things that we've got in place. So we've set up an energy reduction team. I talked about a building energy management engineer. We've got an officer coming in as well to help do this. And they're really doing two things. They're looking at controls, improving the controls, the basic good housekeeping stuff. There's also going to be some behaviour change work that we do. So we've already started those sorts of energy saving campaigns. But we've also got them going round while they're looking at doing these changes to control systems, they're also finding energy efficiency measures. So they're basically auditing as they go around. So and coming up and producing business cases. So we've already started that process, and that's going to take a few years to deliver the outputs of that. But it's already delivering some savings. It's already delivering a list of projects in an auditing way. I think I mentioned about space optimization. We are measuring space utilization, seeing how the spaces are used. You can imagine in an organization like ourselves, we've got timetabling for lectures, seminars, as well as just people using that space. So in terms of offices and stuff, the 9 till 5. So there's quite a lot to look at there. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to use space more effectively and optimize that. So that's why we're working on that and also producing some guidelines. And we're also, I work quite closely with our capital projects team who do all the construction work around that, whether that's major refurbishments or new builds. So, and we've set a design standard for that. Nothing rocket science there. We're using BREEAM for the as our guiding principle there, focusing on excellent. And where we can go above and beyond that, we will try and do that, especially if it has a cost benefit for us. So those are some of the things we're already doing. We're doing a lot on solar at the moment. We've done a feasibility study actually for all of our spaces. So our rooftops, our ground mounted options, and our car parks. We are lucky in that we've got car parks that tend to be concentrated in 1 or 2 areas rather than lots of little spaces. So, for example, our biggest car park, we know that we can do 2 to 3 megawatts of solar on top of that. But we've also got some farmland as a university. We've got a variety of bits of land that we haven't developed over the years. So, and we've actually had farmland that's been used for agriculture, and what we're not really using it for agriculture anymore. So what we're then doing is looking to put ground-mounted solar array on that, and that's actually quite a big development. So if we can get planning approval for it, it'll be one of the biggest in Surrey. It's at 12 megawatts, so that's actually about 8 megawatts of output in AC. So that's something that we're really pressing on. So you can start to see, I'm looking at the demand management stuff in those first things, surveying, energy efficiency, behavior change, all of those things is that demand management. But we are also looking at our decarbonisation of the energy that we actually need. So we're trying to reduce it down, but we're also trying to decarbonise what we've got in there. So, and I'll mention this later on, but, you know, the 8-point plan is really a linear plan. You know, you do 1 to 8 in that way. So, but because 2030 is fast upon us, and I think we've probably all heard the news last night about whether or not 1.5 degrees is possible, and it's likely to be higher than that. We're having to run very quickly at doing this. So other things that we're then starting to look at is actually maximising the output from our solar arrays. The big problem and big challenge, if you are able to have solar, is that it produces a huge amount in the summer when often you're not operating at full capacity. So what do you do with that? So we're looking at how we can take some of that potential spill and put that into other means. So we're looking at battery and thermal storage at the moment. We're also looking at electric boilers and high temperature heat pumps. But we're also looking at things like EV charging and things there. One of the key things that we're looking at and working with our academics, it's great working in a university where we have lots of people that want to do sustainability projects. We're looking at how we do a microgrid and how we integrate that. And being an AI university, you can imagine that that's stimulated our academics to sort of go, right, okay, we could do something really quite interesting here in how we help to manage all of these different interchanges. So if you imagine hundreds of solar panels on lots of different roofs coming into your energy infrastructure, you've got car parks, you've got ground mounted, how you then push that into batteries, thermal storage, and how then you squirt that out back into your infrastructure at the right times for the right demands, maybe even putting it back onto the grid at those peak demand periods where you get some money, so really quite a chunk of money for it. So that's one of the things we're looking at there. And there's a lot of work we're doing around design specifications and also the kind of basic building blocks of stuff. We're doing a lot of electrical surveys. So like many organizations, we didn't really have a good feel other than in people's heads about HV and LV distribution networks. So we've actually spent quite a bit of time getting those together so we understand where energy is coming in from potential renewables, how we would utilize that and how we can get that onto the system and manage it. So, and we've done quite a bit of work with other providers. So, you know, I talked about who we use and utilize. So there are people like EDF and Dalkia that we're looking at. We have a partnership with SSE, I think I can say that. And but we also start to look at other organizations. So there is a local, there's a southeast zero carbon hub that provides support for public sector organizations. So we've joined that. There are other ones for commercial operators. So, and we've talked to Surrey County Council about their funding mechanisms. So even through to our local DNO, so a district network operator, they have funding as well to do projects. So there's a lot of opportunity to get some support and help. And they not only provide funding, but they also provide technical support. So I'm kind of coming towards the end now, and I feel as I've spoken at you for 25 minutes. But as I said, our programs are linear sequence, but we're having to run with it quickly. And we're looking at how we get the best bang for our buck out of some of those systems. So so it's delivery in parallel, in parallel rather than just in a linear fashion. Most of our investments, we're looking to have a positive return on them. They have an internal rate of return or a number of years payback. So the organisation doesn't have a huge amount of money, so we're having to look at how we can leverage that with other third-party funders. So it's very important to sort of dovetail if you're doing this sort of work with other funds that you might have. So that LTM fund, that long-term maintenance fund that we have, boilers fall over, get to the end of their life, we need to replace them. Even our end of life for buildings, we're a university that was built in across a period of time, but a majority of it was built in the 50s and 60s. So those buildings are starting to come to the end of their life. So, but there's opportunities to put sustainability into those replacement projects. So I'll stuck this one in just as a final thing. I mean, I think most of us know, but it was useful for our senior managers to see this. You know, what would happen if we don't do this? So, and it's worthwhile saying that we used to have a utility budget that people didn't really recognise. It was £4 to £6 million. It didn't appear in any discussions about finances really. When it became 15.5, and actually it was 17 at one point, that started to really cause some ructions because that's a big hole in your operating deficits. So, surpluses. So, and those geopolitical things are driving that cost. So what you're trying to do is free yourself from the markets. So demand reduction, you use less. Obviously, you can reduce that cost. But also, if you can get your own supplies, then of renewable energy, then that's really good. It can start to stabilize your budgeting. So there's lost opportunities. There's loads of things in there that if we don't start to do some of this work, in fact, our costs will start to spiral. Our demand will start to spiral. There's things like legislation. So gas boilers, fluorescent tube lighting, some of that stuff is being phased out at the moment. Gas boilers will happen in the future. So we also have funders who are asking us about what we're doing around this area. So we have to start to do that. In fact, there's some of our research councils are asking us to sign up to a concordat that says we're going to do sustainability in our labs. So there's lots to do there, and I won't go through all of these. There's a lot of things there. I mean, ironically, at the bottom, saving the planet. I mentioned the 1.5 earlier on, but yeah, I mean, all of these things are key. as a driver for doing the carbon. So that's me done. So are there any questions? And I don't know, Lucy and Alistair, how you want to run this one. I can't see. I don't know how you want to do the question and answer bit there.
So Martin, there is a question.
All right, okay.
Q&A. It's from Paul Cartwright. He says,
Yeah.
I'm interested in what support you have in your organisation, board level representation through to a Green Champions network.
Brilliant. Okay, so so we have a lot of support in lots of different ways. I have to sort of say we have a lot of grassroots activity. So there's a lot of people doing stuff. So yesterday I was with our vet school. So these are vets teaching students and staff, and they have a sustainability group. And so they're looking at what they can do within their faculty and their department to do around veterinary practices, so which is kind of interesting. So we have a lot of those sorts of groups that are doing, but at a senior level, so we've engaged quite strongly. We have a very small group that we used to have a very large group of the great and the good sitting on a sustainability group, and it really wasn't delivering. If it was doing a lot of talking, and it was very inclusive, and that was lovely, but it did get to a point where we weren't actually making very many decisions. So we've really narrowed that down, and there's now a group that drives the carbon plan that is 3 people. There's an executive dean. There's my opposite number in the Institute for Sustainability. They do really focus on research and teaching, and there's myself on the operational side. So, and we basically drive the plan forwards. We include a lot of different people. So my boss, Joe Bell, is very active in supporting and what we're trying to do around the carbon reduction. So, but we then have a way into our executive board to talk to our vice chancellor, who's like our chief executive. So, and we get that support from them. And I think, there's been some things that have been great in that the increase in cost has not been particularly lovely for the university, from 6 to 15 million, but it has focused the minds to know that what we're doing is something to reduce those costs. So that has been quite a useful tool for us. But I think we have a lot of support in terms of our seniors. Not everybody is fully behind us. Some people are fully behind us because it saves the money. Others are really engaged with it. I'd say, as a final thing, our vice chancellor, Max Liu, he sits on a board for a thing called the Times Higher Impact Ranking, which looks at sustainable development goals and how organisations, universities integrate those. So he's kind of committed at that level. He sits on that working group. So I think there is a lot of support there, and it is something you have to build a coalition. It has taken a bit of time to get people on side to say this is what we must do, and these are the particular things we must drive at. So hopefully that answers the question. So,
Thanks,
Louise,
Martin. That was a good answer. There's another question from Kishan. I would like to introduce substantially in residential buildings for specific in common areas. I'm not sure what the question is there exactly.
So is that wanted to do more in accommodation? So
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, if I say something around that, I mean, accommodation is one of our big areas, and we've started to look at how we do a number of different things actually in our halls of residence. So our halls of residence don't tend to be the communities in terms of the flats of how students share. That's what we really have. So, but beyond that, they don't. You'll have a flat and of 15 flats in a block, so they don't have very much feeling for the rest of the block. It's mainly about their flat. So there is some work we focus in on when we're doing any kind of awareness sort of stuff. So we do focus on that kind of flat level and trying to bring those people together. So and we've done a number of different things. So we've put out there stuff on stickers and how to save, but a lot of the kind of technical stuff is really boiled down to looking at our boilers, and looking at our heating, and we've actually just controlling it during certain periods of the day. So we actually say things like, now we allow heating during the day, but we turn it off between, I think it's about 11 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. So because most of our students they're either going to be active and doing something somewhere, being students, or they're going to be tucked up in bed. So either way, the heating isn't such an issue for them. It's slightly different during the day when they might be sitting in their rooms working and being quite sedentary. So we've looked at things about how we can manage that, but we've had to take these things slowly, and it's taken little steps to get there. So but there are some technical things we can do with our boilers, how we control those. One of the buildings that we took over quite recently from a third-party provider for us, Millennium House, had individual boilers with controls that people could play around with. So basically everybody just turned them on all the time. So we've now changed that and enabled it so the controls aren't open in that way, and we can set the controls and do that. So there's some simple things as well as the more complicated things that we might do. So we've looked at all sorts of things like how we store hot water, how we control that. So there's a lot that we can do around that.
Thanks, Martin. There's a few more questions coming in now. So there's one from Sam Clark. How supportive are University of Surrey students in changing their behaviour to support your plan?
They say they're very supportive. So I should say that the student union in particular wants to do a whole range of things. I think most of them want to do something. They often don't know what is the best thing. So we have to give them a lot of information. So one of the big drivers outside of carbon, one of the big things we've been doing recently is a lot of work around waste management and how they segregate some of their waste. And it's just been telling them where it goes and why we want you to do this. And that actually does help increase that level of awareness and what they want to do. Another one that we've done is working with our academics. We've done some work with shower timers. So, and actually these are kind of digital shower timers, not the kind of ones that you might sort of, I think a lot of people are familiar with those kind of egg timer type of shower timers. These are more digital ones, and they actually tell you how long you've been in the shower. They monitor that, and we've utilised those. And people have suddenly realised, well, actually, blimey, should really be doing a 4 or 5 minute shower. I've been doing one for 8 minutes, so that's changing how people are starting to think about things. So I think giving them information is really useful. And yeah, they are supportive. We have a lot of students that volunteer for us to do sustainability work. So admittedly, that might be, a dozen that do that rather than the thousands that we have. But I think there is a lot of support for it, and they do want to do the right thing.
Thanks, Martin. Next question is from John Catley. How often and how do you communicate to your staff and students and all stakeholders about this project? And does your comms include general sustainability ideas to keep engagement going?
So yeah, that's good, really good question. I've got a small team. There's about 4 of us. So one of those is a comms behavior change person. And we do a lot of communications. So we do a lot of social media. We're on all the platforms. So that's where everybody else is. So we have a website with lots of information. So there's those sort of kind of quite sedentary type of things, and we push that out there. We push out on a fairly regular basis newsletters saying what we're doing and how we're doing those sorts of things. So that again is useful for us. We are running a number of programs. So we run a program called Green Impact. It's been running for a number of years, different universities, but that's an accreditation scheme. So departments can do sustainability actions. The more actions they do, the higher award they get. And we have an award ceremony. The Vice Chancellor gives out awards. And it's all a lovely sort of thing. But that in itself makes people want to do some more sustainability stuff, get involved. They talk to other departments about it, and that starts to spread that message. And part of that program is for them to sort of talk about what projects they've done. So we're actually starting to find out lots of staff and students are doing things themselves. So there's a community garden, for example, in both of our campuses. and those have been set up by staff and students. So there's lots of things that we do. Another thing called a sustainability assembly. We do that once a term, so 3 times a year, once a semester, I should say. So 3 times a year, and that is an open forum for all staff and all students to come to. So, and we usually have a topic for discussion. One of the topics we talked about this week was about induction. So anybody new into the organisation, what do we tell them about sustainability? So, and that was asking our staff to sort of say, well, what do you think should go in that? You know, obviously, here's a load of things about sustainability, but what do people really need to know to try and focus that a bit more specifically for our users? So rather than us to sort of say, we think people need this. So, and that's one of the other things as a final thing. We work quite closely with a lot of our academics. We have a behavior change team in one of our departments, and I'm often firing a question to them saying, well, how do we get people to do X? So, and they will come back and give us some thoughts about how we do that. So there's lots of different things. That's one of the things I would sort of probably say is it's not just one thing that you do, it's lots of different things. So we do have a sustainability week. We're doing that in April, which is great. But, you know, what we're trying to do is eventually I want to phase that out and then have lots of things across the year. And we work with lots of different users on that. So we're doing a lot. Next week, there's a Green Careers Week. So the Careers Office are doing stuff about how students can get jobs in the sustainability field. So you can see there's lots of different ways and means of how you communicate with people about different issues. Should say on the net zero stuff, we've done a lot of work around that. And we've got some videos. You can, if you go onto the university's website, look at sustainability, you can see we've got a couple of videos there about what our net zero plan is and what we're intending to do and how people can get involved. And that's really the key thing. It's that most of this communication is about a call to arms, getting people to help us to do things, to get involved. So, and it's building. It's a slow process of building that kind of understanding, taking people on that journey. So, yeah.
Thanks, Martin. Just one final question I think we've got time for. It says, how has ESOS submissions shaped your net zero plan?
Okay, so we don't do ESOS, so we managed to sidestep that one. So yeah, I mean, so in a way it hasn't, but I suppose the principles of what we're doing aren't that dissimilar really from it. And I think if you talk to anybody, really, their net zero plans, that, you know, it's not rocket science. So I've codified this a little bit, and I think my boss Joe has almost said, well, you know, this isn't rocket science, and it isn't. It is really straightforward. You know, we reduce our demand, and there's lots of opportunity to reduce that demand, and then we decarbonize the energy we have to use. We decarbonize it in some way. So, and I don't think that's any different really. And ESOS and all the other variety of schemes that I'm old enough to have gone through a whole range of different schemes and directives around carbon. And I think, you know, most of them really relate to that. And I think, yeah, I'm old enough to have been doing energy conservation and energy efficiency and carbon management. And we call it different things, but it's the same sort of principles behind most of it. So it is doing those kind of really quite fundamental things and finding the best way of getting there. So and integrating it enough.
Thanks, Martin. I think that's the last question, so you can hand back to Alistair.
Yeah, well, I'll just say thank you, everybody, for listening. So, yeah, and I'll hand over to Alistair. So. Well, is Alistair frozen? I'm sort of wondering.
If he's not there, then maybe I'll just say this is the CPD number for today's event. If you want to scan the code or take a note of the number.
I'll leave that up on the screen for a moment, if that's okay. The thing's, it's going to be, oh, hang on. Oh, I've got Alistair back in, I think.
Yep, don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Okay, over to you, Alistair.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that. So just a reminder to people, if you could make sure that you update your CPD record on the IDFM website, that would be much appreciated. If we could do next slide, please, Martin. And then just a reminder, again, all this information it can be found on the IWM website. So here's just some information about upcoming courses to continue on from the fantastic talks actually today from Martin, because I think it's such an important conversation in so many organisations. So I think just to continue on with learning and finding out what's available to us. So here's just some more courses and dates. And then again, just some more courses and dates coming up, which take us to the end of November. And then if you want to, again, all for knowledge, we've got the Energy Management Partnership with Carbon Numbers, which is downloadable just on the QR code. Again, still findable on the IDFM website. So please make sure you look at that. And then next slide. And then again, perfect. So again, more content, all for reading. Maybe some more during bedtime, but it's all really important stuff, things that you can do that can really help you in your workplace. So do make sure that you again download that document. And then a bit like all of us and the people that you see in front of us, you know, if you can find some time to volunteer, be it as a mentor or a mentee, if you want to continue studying or fit it in at the same time, you know, please do so. You know, it's all valuable. We've all got stories to share and information that can be passed from each other and lots to learn. So if you do have time, you do wish to volunteer, then please find out a little bit more by visiting the website or scanning the QR code. And then just to follow up on that, so on the IWFM website, under membership, you will see many routes, some that you can join and you can advance your IWFM career that can help you in whatever aspect you wish to do. And then also you can join wonderful committees such as this, and you can talk to interesting people and you know, use it as a chance for a bit of your professional development and hear insights and stories that you wouldn't necessarily think possible. And then again, you can follow us there on X, which is formerly Twitter, and then LinkedIn. And then any more questions?
I can't see any more questions on there at the moment, Alistair.
I'll stop sharing now, I think, as well. So yeah, and go back to the.
I think that's it with the questions.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I just say, Martin, thank you for today. It's been fantastic to hear it. I've just got one question from myself actually. So the data that you gather and you've gathered over years, is that done in-house or have you used an external energy provider does someone verify your bills before they go to finance for payment? I mean, how do you get that level of data that you can manipulate?
So that was a good question. We collect the data ourselves. So we've got lots of sub-metering as well as the physical meters on the site. And we put that through, it's a combination of things. So some of it's hardwired. So we collect that data, but mostly through our building energy management system. There is some that is still kind of arcane and we go and read meters. So, but we try to put most of that into a more set system. We use Team Sigma, so to do and draw all that stuff together. They offer us a range of different supports around that, and we also have our energy broker can help us look at some of that data as well. So, and a lot of the data actually comes from our physical stuff. We moved to electronic billing, so most of that stuff comes at us, so we can just squirt it into the system, and then we just run some checking reports to make sure it's the right it's what it should be. So, but yeah, most of that comes through that, and we do that kind of analysis sort of in-house. We are looking at how we can do more of that, and I think once you've got a good feel for the data, actually putting it out to a third party and letting them do that bit of it can work quite well, because you know what to ask them and what to see. Sometimes you have to be, like with most things, the buyer beware, that if you don't know very much about your data and you give it to somebody else, are you getting what you need out of them? But that's how we've done it, and we've had that in place for a number of years. In my previous roles, that's also what I've done. We've done it in-house, and I've had a data analyst to really look at that data and really squirrel into it, and that's kind of your bread and butter of it, really. And you need to have that kind of control of it. But yeah, you can do it with a third party, and most of the big kind of providers like that, or Stark or whatever, do those things. And some of the actual partners that you might team up with, so the EDFs and the SSEs and the Siemens, will do a lot of this sort of system for you as well. So.
And then when you touched upon on the wider estate, you were talking about some water consumptions and water savings. So for those individuals on the call that maybe have sports fields or green spaces part of their portfolio, have you done much work, or has the team done much research into water boreholes and the benefit that they might have on the estate?
Yeah, so we have a borehole. We draw water from main Staghill site, and we did a lot of work around that to do test borings and all those sorts of things. The problem that you start to run up against with most of this stuff is I don't know who's on the call, so I've got to be careful what I say, I think. So one of the problems you have here is there are other interested parties in those aquifers. So your water authority, your water boards in your local areas, and while you're extracting it, you're not paying them for it. So we make quite a significant saving by doing it ourselves. But then there is an argument around extraction from the aquifer, and particularly with the high leakage rates that some of our water companies have, they're not that happy about you doing that direct withdrawal. So we've got a borehole, and we've been asked to reduce the amount of water we take from it. We had another potential for another borehole, but that was rejected because of the level of water that we might end up taking from it. So, but there are other possible opportunities about what we do with those boreholes. But yeah, it's worked out for us. It's been a cost-effective project. I think a previous officer who was in the team has now moved on to bigger and better things. He did the borehole project, and he actually found ultimately we were, I think, more or less the cheapest water customer in the HE sector. So because we were using the borehole water, it's also very good water because it's from a chalk aquifer, so it's very pure. So we don't have to do a huge amount of treatment of it. That's the other thing to remember. In certain places you might have to do quite a lot of treating to turn it from just like a grey water system or a rainwater system into something that's potable and that can be used. So yeah, we have to do a lot of testing on it as well.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today. Thanks for everyone who's joined the webinar today. I will hope you have a fantastic weekend coming up. And then just as a final check from me, Louise, Lucy, is there anything more to add from today's webinar?
No, that's it from us. Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you, Alistair.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Martin.